Welcome back to Crimes Against Christmas by New Old Friends. I'm Heather.
I'm Ferg.
This is chapter 21. Father Vickers' death in the previous chapter seemed to disprove Archge's theory. How will our hero react? Chapter 21. Playing catch-up.
My room was now the final resting place of Father John Vickers. I'd no desire to lug his body down the stairs to Butler's cupboard of corpses, so instead I left him where he was and went down to the Great Hall. I felt the need to pace. One always reads of great thinkers having their epiphanies whilst pacing, and I fancied a bit of an epiff myself. I reasoned that when the time came I'd sleep in the priest's room, although that rested upon two fairly large assumptions. One, that I'd make it to tonight, and two, that I'd be in any state to sleep if I did. My 12 days of Christmas theory appeared to have been proved wrong, but could the murderer have listened to me solve it and then changed up their plans just to spite me? Well, surely not. If you were depraved enough to concoct such a grotesque plan, you'd surely see it through regardless once you'd got in this far, wouldn't you? Besides, if it all went to plan, there wouldn't be any witnesses to tell about its uncovering. I'd carried the odd wind instrument with me, which had killed Vickers, and now I set it on the grand central table. If I could just figure out this clue, I was sure I'd be able to piece together a new hypothesis to explain the unusual method of the killings. I paced and I paced, but epiphany was eluding me, probably because I was unwilling to give up on the duodecimal countdown of death model. It fit so well with what had gone before, and there was my name, of course, plus one other obvious victim. Terry Turtle Dove? If Turtle was to be the penultimate victim with me as the headliner, it would confirm the sense of trust I felt for him, despite having little evidence to support it. It all just tallied too well. I was totally convinced of it, and yet I'd seen Vickers expire with my own eyes and nary a gold ring in sight. Setting aside this uncertainty, what was undeniable is the number of potential suspects and victims had shrunk to 5, 4 if I discount myself. There were 2 clear groups, Turtle and Michelle, and the Duke and Butler, or guests and long-term residents. Even if it weren't for my hunch that Turtle was to represent the second day of Christmas, it still made more sense for the killer to be in the latter group. After all, only the Duke and Butler remained who would have had any prior knowledge of the passages through the house, the existence of Daisy the cow, and, crucially, the pet names of Lord and Lady de Planus. Both Richenstein and Butler have also been hovering high on my list at various points, and, as Vickers had once pointed out, if they were working together, they'd have the perfect combination of skills and knowledge to achieve their murderous aim. My meditative marching was hailed by a noise from the hallway outside, a series of percussive thuds upon the stairs. My mind instantly added visuals to the unseen sound. I pictured a lifeless body being launched from the upper landing and its lolling head thudding upon the steps. Witnessing the death of Vickers and feeling his blood cool on my fingers had not done the same for me, the opposite in fact. My blood was hot. I was now firmly lodged on the fight side of nature's dichotomy. Not that I'd ever considered cowardly flight, of course. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and rushed to the door. Beyond which I saw Michelle, who was also armed. Her weapon of choice, a broken stand from the standard lamp in her room. She didn't notice me at first because she was occupied in helping Turtle up. He was in a heap at the foot of the staircase and was clearly the cause of the noise I'd heard. Thankfully, he didn't look too badly hurt beyond a bump or two. "Oh, I'm glad to see you're both okay. When I heard the noise, I feared the worst," I said. Michelle spun around and cocked her standard lamp slugger behind her head, ready to swing. The strength and defiance she'd shown when defending Turtle in the parlour earlier were turned all the way up. This girl meant business.
"Stay back!"
she yelled at me.
"What are you doing down here?"
"Well, I could ask you two the same question," I replied as calmly as I could manage, although I suspect my reassuring tone was somewhat undermined by my refusal to lower my poker. The instinctive faith I felt in Turtle's innocence, and Michelle's by association, remained, but adrenaline was coursing through me, and I'd seen enough that I'd have been wary of the Virgin Mary had she appeared before me carrying an improvised club. All of us spoke together, our voices a 3-part harmony of fear, suspicion and doubt.
There's been another murder!
The news shared, our little choir broke up. the two sides eyeing the other across the entranceway. Michelle took a half-step forward, giving her lamp a little wiggle behind her head as she spoke, as if to advertise her readiness to swing.
How did you know there's been another murder?
She demanded, whereas Turtle responded by wrapping his arms around her waist, dragging Michelle away from me whilst at the same time hiding himself behind her. Oh, God, show us him! He's the murderer! It's the only way!
Is that true, Mr. Artridge? Are you going to kill us now?
For my part, I was equally stunned by the fact this pair knew of Vickers' death. I'd left his body in my room, so there were only two possibilities. They'd come looking for me and let themselves in, which is suspicious in itself. Or worse, they knew Vickers had been killed because they'd killed him. I stepped back, so I was pressed against the door to the great hall and held my poker straight out in front of me like a divining rod. I'm not the killer, and I'm not going to kill you. How could you two know there's been another murder already? Turtle switched positions, so his head was poking out over Michelle's shoulder. Her face was now framed by her lover and her weapon. We found the body, didn't we? Your theory was spot on. 5 gold rings? Is telling us your plan part of the fun, showing off how clever and cruel you can be before killing us? His face was so open, his eyes so filled with fear that I couldn't help but believe what he was saying. I needed to give them both a reason to trust me, so lowered my poker to the floor and raised both my hands palm out to them. Look, I swear I don't know what you're talking about. I was alone in my room as we all agreed, but Vickers started banging on my door. He was choking. His breath was like awful quacking. I tried to help him, but the poor bugger collapsed and died right in front of me. There were no gold rings anywhere near him, though. If you saw rings, then the killer must have gone back and placed them. I'm telling the truth, I promise. Michelle dropped her improvised club, which clattered to the floor. She turned to Turtle and said in a voice I struggled to hear,
Oh, God, Terry, the father's dead too.
2? What do you mean, 2? My mind was struggling to keep up with the pace of the revelations. Who did you find? The couple were holding each other tenderly. In such a twist of arms they almost looked conjoined. 2 heads, 4 arms and 4 legs united in horror. It was the female head which continued to speak.
We found the butler.
Did he come to your room? The bicephalic beast turned its 2 heads to face each other. Turtle nodded softly and sadly to Michelle, who spoke.
Earlier on, before you made me go and check on Lady Duplantis, Turtle wasn't really in our room. I just pretended he was because I didn't want anyone to be suspicious.
That would explain how he appeared behind me, causing me to shriek and jump. To jump and someone else to shriek, I mean. Well, where was he? Michelle looked back to her boyfriend and he took up the story. To be honest, Mr. Artridge, I'd gone to find a toilet. All the fancy food doesn't agree with me and I needed to, you know... I addressed my next question to Michelle. The way she'd comported herself thus far left me in no doubt she was the brains of the pair. Why didn't you just say that, Michelle?
I don't know. I was scared. It was stupid. But anyway, after you sent us all back to our rooms, we just got more and more scared. I mean, the killer had got to Lady Duplantis in her room, so why would we be any safer? So I made this club and we decided we would rather try and find somewhere to wait for the boat outside. That's when we found the butler.
I was trying to piece this all together. I still felt inclined to believe them, but I couldn't quite see how Turtle's toilet trip had any bearing on how they'd come across Butler's body. Michelle must have read the doubt on my face. Sometimes my eyebrows are too chatty for their own good, so she explained.
When Terry had gone off to find the loo, he found a second set of stairs which we thought would be less conspicuous, so we headed that way, past Lady Duplantis' bedroom at the other end of the corridor. Butler was lying at the bottom of the staircase, surrounded by blood.
Dear God! Was there any sign of how he died?
Either he tripped on the stairs, or more likely someone snuck up and pushed him. In his hands were...
5 gold rings, I finished for her. The killer's plan is still on course. What do you mean? Asked Turtle, with a vacant expression. Michelle's face, on the other hand, was frowning in thought, her mind ticking over possibilities. She asked me,
How did you say Father Vickers died, Mr. Artridge?
He choked to death on an odd whistle-type thing. It was disgusting. I had to pull it out with my bare hands, but I was too late. The girl let go of Turtle, tucked her ringlets behind her ears and picked up her club with purpose.
Can you show it to me, Mr. Artridge?
I led her into the great hall, noting what I'd found to check earlier. There were only 3 fir trees remaining. I pointed her towards the item I'd removed from Vickers' throat. She paced towards it with purpose, snatched it in her hands and continued pacing. She was evidently having an epiphany. The way she punched the air twice suggested she was maybe having more than one. She was epiphing all over the place and right in front of us. I was a little bit miffed, to be honest. Being as I'd been the one to fish the rummy thing from inside a dying man, I rather thought the eureka moment might have been mine. But alas, such is life.
It's a duck whistle, Mr. Artridge.
A duck whistle? I parroted back, not fully comprehending.
Yeah, or a bird call,
she said, with her eyebrows raised so high they disappeared behind her fringe. Well, I'll be. Calling birds, I finally caught up. That's the next on the list. Turtle had been struggling to follow along, but now he grasped what was happening. Hang on, he said, as though unveiling some great hidden truth. If the killer isn't Artridge and Butler and Father Vickers are dead, then the murderer must be the old Duke! The lad was so thrilled with his reasoning, I didn't quite have the heart to burst his bubble. Why, yes, you're quite right, Turtle. Good show. But he wasn't to be quelled quite so easily. He was in the grip of a powerful wave of relief. Well, then we're safe. We survived. Oh, thank God. We just need to wait until morning and the boat will come and take us home, Duchess. At this point, unfortunately, the bubble was in jeopardy of floating towards some rather catastrophic danger and had to be popped. If this young chap thought that the threat was over, he could put himself or others at risk. I'm not quite sure that's right, I'm afraid. We do know who he is, but the old bugger has contrived to kill 9 people, including his daughter, so we shouldn't let our guard down just yet. You don't understand, Mr. Artridge. Look at the mantelpiece. He gestured at the 3 remaining trees triumphantly. There are only 3 trees left, and there are 3 of us, so the old Duke must be dead.
Oh, my sweet,
said Michelle with a kindly stroke of his arm.
There were only ever 12. I'm not supposed to be here, remember?
Realisation dawned on the poor chap. Oh, so we're not safe yet?
Not quite, my darling. And this duck whistle gives me a bad feeling about something. But I think I have an idea. Mr. Artridge, do you think you can find Duke Wittgenstein and bring him to the orchard?
I looked at this slip of a thing who in the last 10 minutes seemed to have taken control of the entire situation. There was a small, ugly part of my masculinity which felt challenged, but I'm relieved to say a far larger part was just happy to be on her side. Plus, I reasoned to myself, I was a professional investigator/detective, so when credit was handed out, I could be sure of a sizable portion. Also, don't those chappies in the novels often have sidekicks and whatnot who occasionally chime in with advice? My ego so mollified, I agreed to fetch the culprit. Oh, I think I can manage that. He might be a master of potions and sneak attacks, but if I keep him where I can see him, I think I'll have the edge. Michelle declined to tell me the full details of her plan, and I can't say I blamed her. They exited through the far door, and I went off in search of the Duke. I had it all neatly laid out in my mind. The Duke had dosed Drummer with a sedative before dumping him in the drum, thwacked an unsuspecting Betty with the pipe, slipped Crimine something psychotropic to convince him he could fly, prepared Fuctifino's Phosgene martini, doped Daisy the cow so she'd collapse and crush Missy, weakened Lord Duplantis with chemicals before his swim, and at least he'd given his daughter a relatively peaceful end. Unlike the poor priest, who he'd offed using some of his old hunting equipment. Maybe Butler had been in on it from the beginning, but the old man caught him helping himself to the family heirlooms and seized an opportunity to shove him down the stairs. But why had the Duke hired the German to bring us all here just to kill us? What was the link? That was what I intended to find out. He wasn't in his room, and I hadn't really expected him to be. I searched the rest of the house and eventually found him in the kitchen, calmly tucking into one of Betty's final pre-prepared meals.
Oh man, the butler's gone too. So it was a grumpy old Duke then.
Looks like it.
If you're enjoying the story.
If you're not enjoying it, why are you still listening 21 days in? Anyway.
We'd love it if you could give us a rating or leave a review on Apple Podcasts.
Please.
Just drop us a message on social media letting us know.